If one of these men enters into a state of trance, is levitated into the air, or produces a simple mediumistic phenomenon, do they know the occult causes which produce such effects? What do they know about the conditions required to enter a higher state of consciousness other than that of ordinary mortals? Are their inner senses sufficiently open so that they may hear, see, taste, smell, and feel things imperceptible to the senses of the average human being? Do these religious orders fulfill their original purpose of raising people up into a higher and spiritual state of existence? Do they consciously exercise any spiritual powers? Can they knowingly cure the sick with the touch of their hands? Can they prophesy with any degree of certainty future events except by the conclusions of logic? Are there any among them who have become adepts? What do these monks, priests, and nuns know about the constitution of the human soul, especially those souls entrusted to their care? What are their experiences when in that higher state called enlightenment? Or is not such an occurrence considered to be an unexplainable or supernatural miracle? Is not the person to whom such a thing can happen considered a saint? It is idle for the priests to assert that they can forgive sins, or that sins can be forgiven through them, for such an assertion can neither be proved nor disproved intellectually. It will always remain a mere matter of opinion. If they don't possess any spiritual powers, we can't believe that they can communicate them to others. And if they convey such powers to others, where are their effects to be seen? Do the ignorant become wise after having been baptized with water? Do those who have submitted to the ceremony of confirmation obtain true faith? Does the sinner become innocent after having the load removed from their conscience through absolution? Can our clergy change the laws of nature? Can they by any external ceremony cause the growth of an inner principle? Or do those who enter a church an animal come out an animal still? I don't mean to throw any discredit upon the motives of any of these people in these convents or nunneries or in the Catholic Church. I'm sure they are good and kind and well-meaning people, without that priestly pride and arrogance which unfortunately often characterize the clergy of the world. I believe that all the good which they do, they could perform as well and even a great deal better if they were to undertake the study of the soul, its organization and functions, and if they were qualifying themselves for that study. They would then be able to develop consciously those higher faculties which have spontaneously developed among some of their members who, on account of such an unexpected and abnormal development, were called miracle workers or saints. How can anyone be a true spiritual guide who has no spiritual powers, and who perhaps doesn't even know that such powers exist, or even worse, calls such powers demonic? What would you think of a surgeon who knew nothing of anatomy? What of a physician who didn't know their patient? What of a blind painter, a deaf musician, an imbecile mathematician? What shall we think of a physician of the soul who knows nothing about the soul or its attributes, or who has never seen it, and is of the mere opinion that it exists? Have we not a right to doubt the usefulness of such a physician? If the clergy, instead of employing the time and energy which they need for the performance of their customary ceremonies, for the saying of rosaries and the repetition of litanies, were to employ them to acquire self-knowledge for the study of the essential constitution of humans and of nature, and for the acquisition of spiritual power, their usefulness might be extended to an enormous degree. Their knowledge would be no longer restricted to earthly things, but expand to heaven. They wouldn't need to nurse the sick or exorcise demons, for they could cure people with the touch of their hands. They wouldn't need to baptize people with water, for they could baptize them with the spirit of sanctity. They wouldn't need to listen to confessions, for they would be able to read the thoughts of the culprit. Should they not be able to do their duties much better if they were wise instead of ignorant? If they knew the truth instead of blindly accepting a creed? If they had the power to accomplish that which they now expect an invisible and unknown power to accomplish in response to their prayers? If the public believes that there is one miracle-working saint at a convent, do they not rush there to receive their blessings? What would be the fame of a convent composed entirely of saints whose powers couldn't be doubted? But how can this clergy acquire such power? How can they qualify themselves for such a study? It has been said that it is 10 times more difficult to remove an old error than to find the new facet of truth, and there lies the difficulty. A page full of writing will have to be cleaned before it can be written on again. They would have to purge their minds of all dogmatism and sophistry before they could see the light of truth. They would have to become like children before they could enter the kingdom of heaven within their own souls. They would have to remove the mountain of rubbish which has accumulated in time in the vestibule of the temple, consisting of errors and superstitions. To become wise, they would have to learn the true meaning of their own doctrines, symbols, and books, which they merely know from the outward form and the dead letter. They would have to form a much higher and nobler conception of God. They would have to base their moral doctrines upon the intrinsic dignity of the divine principle in humanity, instead of appealing to its selfish desires and fear of punishment to induce them to seek salvation. Why should those who have begun to see the dawn of the day close their eyes and wait until the blind would inform them that the sun is rising over the mountains? Is the love of truth not strong enough to accomplish what the fear of dread hereafter has been able to accomplish?